everyone, and welcome to our video tutorial for this lavender necktie that you can see Melba wearing here. So we hope you enjoy it. Please like, share and subscribe, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks. Bye. Okay, so to make this lavender necktie, you'll need yarn in 3 colours, and 2 of the colours are probably going to be green and purple or a lavender colour, but you know, this potentially looks a bit like a gladiolus as well, so you can, you know, choose whichever colours you like. I'm going the standard lavender for the flowers, the green for the stem, and then I've chosen this bright pink in the same yarn for the bow to tie the lavender flowers together. Okay, so this one here is a cotton rayon blend. You can see that's got this kind of a shine through it. That's the rayon. And yeah, but it's about a 3 weight that I'm using today. Potentially you could go quite a bit finer than this. You could, you know, a 1 to 2 weight would also be fine. But this is what I've got, and I think it works out quite well in this pattern. You'll need a crochet hook, and I'm actually going quite slightly smaller than what my yarn recommends. So I'm going for a 2.5mm hook. You'll need some scissors to snip ends. You'll need a darning needle with a large eye and a relatively sharp point for some quite fine sewing work. You know, that's not essential, but I would recommend one with a sharper point than, you know, just your standard darning needle. And a tape measure, which is just optional to take a measurement of your cat's neck circumference. I'll include in the description box below a standard guide to cat neck sizing, and you can work from there. The tie on this project can be, you know, can be sized to whatever size you want it to be, and you don't need an exact measurement. So if you don't have an exact measurement, no problem, work from the guide in the description box below. Okay, so here's one I've made previously, and you can see that I've made 2 flower stems and the bow to attach the 2 stems together. Now we'll be making this, so we'll make the flowers first and we'll make the stem, and then we'll attach onto our stem to add the flower portion, and then we'll make the bow and shape it into a, you know, a bow shape, and then add the tie. Okay, and I've done just 2 stems of flowers here. You can do more. It's, you know, you could do 3 potentially. If you've got finer weight yarn than mine, you might want to add an extra one. And also you can decide how long you want the flowers to be. On this one here, I've actually made the flowers and the stem portions equal. This time I'm going to make the stem portions a little bit longer than this one. I want the flowers to hang a little bit lower. Okay, so I'm going to do that this time. But, you know, you can decide all those things for yourself. And the stitches and techniques that you'll need to know are how to make a slip knot onto your hook, how to create a chain, how to single crochet, how to slip stitch, how to tie on your yarn. So we'll make the stem, we'll tie on our yarn to add these flowers, and you'll need to know how to tie on your yarn. I'll show you how to do that in the way that I do it. And from there, a double crochet and a chain 1 picot for these flowers. After that, yeah, that's all the stitches in the flower stems. And in this bow, we're just creating a chain, simple chain, and shaping it into a bow, adding the center portion here, and then adding another chain for the necktie. Okay, so they are all beginner-friendly techniques. If you need to brush up on anything before you get started, then please do. And a reminder that I use US terminology. So, yeah, other than weaving in your ends, that's all the techniques that you'll need to know. So, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, take your green, or whatever colour you're using for the stems, and you'll make a slip knot onto your hook, however you do that. And as I said, you get to decide how long you want the stems to be. Okay, so let's just bring in the one. So I've already made one already, and I'm going to make a second one the same as this one. Okay, so you get to decide, like I said, how long you want it to be, and it will depend, of course, on your, you know, what you're making it for. It'll depend on your yarn and hook size. So what I'm going to do is chain 22, and that just corresponds to the size that I want. So make a chain 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So how I'm breaking this up, just to show you what I'm doing. So I've allowed 9 chains for the flower area, and it's best if you allow a multiple of 3. Now that's not essential, but if you can allow a multiple of 3 for the flower section, do that. And then you can make the stem section as long as you want, and I'm allowing 12 for the stem section here. So I've got 12 chains for the stem that's you know, not hasn't got any flowers on it, and I'm allowing 9 chains for the flowered area. Okay, so that gives me a total of 21, and I'm adding an extra chain as a turning chain. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish off the chain that length of chain that I'm making, and I'll be back and I'll show you how to complete the stem. Okay, so I've got my chain of 22 there. So we're going to start with single crochets. So we're going to start at the end that will have the flowers attached. So I've allowed 9 stitches or 9 chains for that area. And as I said, it's best that it's a multiple of 3. So let's say 9, 12, 15 chains, that sort of number, but it will depend on the size that you want to make these flowers. It will depend on the size of your yarn, the size of your hook. I've allowed 9 for that area. So we're going to start with the second chain from the hook and place a single crochet, and then we're going to add a single crochet in each chain for another 8 chains. So I've got a total of 9. So whatever is the number of chains you've allowed for your flower area, for the area where the flowers will be attached, you add single crochet by 1 in each of those chains. Okay, so how many have I got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2 more, 8 and 9. Okay, so just once again, that's going to be this area here. And then we're going to just slip stitch down the remainder of the chain to create this area here. So it's just a little bit thinner than this part underneath the flowers. So just slip stitch, and however many you've allowed for your stem area, or the stem without the flowers, just slip stitch down the end, down to the end of your stem. Okay, so I've got 12 slip stitches, so I'm going to finish that off camera and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm just adding my last slip stitch in my last chain, and now I'm just going to yarn over and pull through, just leaving tail enough for weaving in, and snip off your end. And I tend to leave my tails until the end, so I'm just going to move on straight on to my flowers. Okay, so I'll weave in those tails at the end. You can weave them in now, no problem, if you want to pause here and weave in your ends. Otherwise, we're going to start to add the flowers. Okay, so you'll start up at the opposite end to where your tails are, and you're going to tie on to that very first single crochet. So how I tie on, and if you've got a different way, please do it your way. Just insert your hook into that first single crochet. I just wrap my yarn over top of my hook with the tail at the back. Just pull up a loop and chain 1 to secure. So, if you've got a different method, then please do it, your way. And you can just pull then on the tail to tighten. Now we're going to single crochet back into that same stitch. Okay, you can chain 1 if you want to, but I don't think it's necessary here. Just single crochet back into that same stitch. Then chain 2, and we're going to place a double crochet back into that same stitch. So we're working into that same stitch, okay, with a double crochet. Then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to do a picot. Now a picot, we're going to work into, let me just pull out my hook for a moment. We're going to slip stitch into these 2 loops here underneath that chain 1 that you've just done. Okay, so you've chained 1, and then we're going to insert the hook into those 2 loops at the base of that chain 1 and slip stitch. It's a little bit tricky for me because my hook, is smaller than my yarn requires. Let's start that again. Okay, so into those 2 loops and slip stitch. Okay, so that's the first, kind of petal. Now we're going to repeat that 3 more times in this same stitch, in that same space. So let's do that again. So double crochet, chain 1, and then picot. And let's do it 2 more times. 1, double crochet, chain 1, and then picot. And 1 more time. Double crochet, chain 1, and picot. Okay, so that's our first little flower area. Okay, and now we're going to move, so we want to wind, let me just bring in my other one again. We want to wind the flowers around the stem. As you can see there, it's winding in a spiral. So what we're going to do is move, so we've started to work on the single crochet edge, but now we want to turn this towards us and work along this chain edge. So you want to count 3 chains, so 1, 2, that's 1, 2, and 3, and then you want to insert your hook from underneath up into that chain and do a single crochet. Okay, now let's just do that again. This is really the only tricky part of this whole project. So turn towards the chain edge, so you'll be working along the chain edge. Count 3 chains, so 1, 2, and 3, and then insert your hook up underneath that chain and make a single crochet. Okay, so you can see that's kind of spiraling around, and now we just continue on and create exactly the same as we've just done here. So we chain 2, double crochet, chain 1, and picot. Double crochet back into that same chain, chain 1, and picot. Okay, so I'm going to just pause the camera here. I'm going to finish off my next 2 double crochet chain 1 picots, and then we'll come back, and you can probably guess what's going to happen. We're going to move back to this top area here. Okay, so we're going to continue spiraling around. So I'm going to pause here. I'll meet you once I've finished off this next little flower area, and yeah, see you shortly. Okay, so that's that second area done, and now we're going to turn this back towards us so we can work along that top area. And so you want to count once again 3 stitches, 1, 2, and let me just get around there, 1, 2, and 3. Insert your hook into that 3rd stitch along and single crochet. Okay, and then we're just going to repeat the process. Okay, and then we're going to continue doing that. So I'm going to finish this one. I'm going to go back to the chain edge and do another one. So actually it's this way. So you're turning it away from you. Okay, so you want that spiral effect. And then I'll count 3 chains here, and I'll do another one, and then I'll do another one over this side, and then we'll anchor it. Okay, so go ahead, finish off these next 2 flowers, and you might have, you might be adding more of these flower sections than me, depending on how, or less, depending on how, how long you've made, or how many stitches you've allowed for your flower area. Okay, so that's just, you just keep repeating that process, alternating sides, and allowing the flowers to spiral around the stem until you reach where you've started your slip stitches. Okay, now if you go one too far, or one not far enough, if that makes sense, then it's no big deal. Okay, but you just want to stop somewhere, around where you transition from your single crochet to your slip stitch, and I'll show you how I secure this at the end. So I'm going to go on and continue and finish a couple more of these flower areas. You do the same, and I'll meet you once you get down to that transition there where you'll stop your flower section. Okay, so yeah, I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so through the magic of video editing, I'm back. I'm a lot quicker than a few minutes. So I've finished off my last flower section there. So for my 9 stitches, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 flower sections. Okay, so now I'm just going to tie off, and what I do is when I'm tying off, I don't count the 3. Okay, I just come over to the opposite side, just as I, continuing the spiral, and then I just single crochet to secure it directly underneath the last one on that same side. Okay, does that make sense? So let's just show you that again. Hopefully that makes sense. So I would just rotate away from me as I normally would, but I just secure with a single crochet without counting the 3 along. Okay, and then I'll just yarn over and pull through and snip my end. Where's my scissors? Here we go. Just leaving enough of a tail. Just tighten that up. And then we've just got to weave in these tail ends. So I've got my two lavender there. So I'm just let's just show you one of these tail ends, but weaving in tail ends is a skill that I kind of assume that you know how to do. Let's just weave in, so let's weave in this one that we've just done here. So just thread your needle. So you just want to hide these tails. And what I tend to do is I kind of sew back into the stem area just to secure that one more time and pull that a bit tighter. See how that just kind of pulls that a little bit tighter? And then into the base of the flower, just weave in through the stitches there. And I just, for this a project like this, I just sort of weave in, and then I double back without doubling back exactly where I've come, of course. I just skip over that loop and I come back and pull through, and then I just snip off the excess. And I'll do the same at the top with the other purple end. And what I do with these 2 tail ends down at the stem is I actually just tie a simple double knot. So once and twice, just a simple knot to secure that. And then I'll weave these tail ends into the back here of the slip stitches. Okay, it's a little bit more tricky weaving tail ends into slip stitches, and that's why I recommend having the sharp needle, if you haven't got as much sort of space in the stitches to work with. So yeah, I think I'll do this off camera. I'll pause here, and I'm kind of, like I said, I'm assuming that you'll know how to do this, but just weave your yeah, so it's quite tight in there when you're weaving into slip stitches, so that's why this sharp needle is good. So just go ahead, weave it up, weave it back, and I'll meet you once I've done all my tail ends. Okay, so I've got my two lavender stems there, and now we're going to create the bow. Okay, so you'll take your I'll just put those aside for a moment. You'll take your colour that you're using for the bow and make a slip knot onto your hook. Now, it's entirely up to you how big you make your bow. Or how big. So you can see that I've, that's sort of the size that I've made in comparison to the stems. And I'm going to make the same sort of size again. So what I'll do, and this might vary for you, but I'm going to go ahead and chain 40 chains to make my bow. 2, 3 and 4. So you go ahead now, use my 40 chains as a bit of a ballpark, but again, just bear in mind that if you'll obviously be using a different yarn to me, possibly a different hook size, and you might want a bigger or smaller bow than what I've made here. Okay, so 40 allows me to do this size bow. Okay, so it's not counting this tie-on part, we'll make that separately, but for this size bow, in proportion to what I've got there, then I'm going to chain 40 chains. Okay, so you go ahead and chain, somewhere in the ballpark of 40, it might be 50, it might be 30, depending on, those factors, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so I've got my 40 chains there, so I'm just going to yarn over and pull through. And just snip off that excess. And just tighten that knot at the end, those knots at either end. Okay, so now we'll just take a moment to weave in our tail ends. And it's not the easiest thing to do into a chain, but if I can get this threaded. So we just want to weave these tail ends into the chain. So I just go into the back and I just kind of try to follow the chain a little bit. So come across. Slippery fingers. There we go. So I just try and sort of weave it, zigzag across the chain at the back, into the back of the back loop of the chain. So you've got this little loop in the back here. See, I just try and sort of zigzag it through there, and then go across to that other loop. That's the way that I find it's easiest to weave into the back of the chain. So go ahead and finish off that. Just weave up into the chain, and I weave it up, a good few chains. So you do the same. Weave in your, you don't have to do this method for weaving in, but you do yours, and I'll see you, and do your other end as well. See, that looks pretty good. It's not too bad there. So go ahead, do your other end as well, and I'll meet you once I've done mine. Oops, sorry, turning up the camera. I'll meet you once I've done mine. Okay, so you've got your little length there. You've woven in those ends. And now we're just going to shape this into a bow. So just put the ends together and sort of pinch it at the top. And we're going to take a length of our yarn. So just cut yourself a length. I've cut about 30 centimetres there. And I'm just going to thread that into my needle. And we're just going to sew these pieces together. So I'm just going to sew this across here. So you don't have to do this, this part perfectly. You just want to join them so then you can start to wrap the center. So pull that through, and don't pull it right through. Leave a length on the other side, and then just pinch down. And I just go, so make sure you've got your bow shaped how you want it to be shaped. I'm just going to go up. So you just want to sew it, just hand sew it into a bow shape. Oops, just make sure you haven't got bits tangled. There we go. So you're just kind of doing this roughly, and I'll just come back down into that other side. So you can kind of do this however you want to. Just sew it into a rough sort of bow shape there, like so. And then you can remove your needle, and then we're just going to start wrapping. So I would wrap, so you've got two ends. I would wrap one way, so wrap it around the center of your bow. Wrap one way, 2, 3, and 4, and then just finish off at the back, and then wrap the other one the other way. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that you can wrap as much or as little as you want. You just want to make it look like a bow. So let's just see what I've got there. So it's a little bit fiddly. Yeah, that's cute. There we go. And then once you've done that, just tie. Oh, did I wrap them both in? Oh no, I didn't. Yeah, I've wrapped them both in the same direction. So don't do that. So that one's going that way. I need this one to go this way. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. So yeah, wrap them in the opposite way. So then what you can do is you can secure this with a double knot at the back. Just one of those simple double knots again. Just secure that at the back. Now just before you do the secure, just make sure you've got it looking how you want it to do. Look at the front. Just shape your bow and then secure it at the back. Okay, so leave those tail ends. We're going to use those a little bit later. And now we just need to create the necktie, which is just a simple chain to the length that you need. Now I'm going to chain 120. Now for Melba, that gives me the length that I need for her neck circumference in this yarn, plus enough to tie a bow. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 120, and yours might be different. So work out how much you'll need, and you can, check it on your cat. Work out how much you'll need for your cat's neck circumference, and whether you want to tie a bow or just a little knot at the back of their neck. Yeah, like I said, 120 is good for me, and you're probably looking, it depends entirely on your cat size, but any, sort of 80 chains plus. Okay, up to, wherever you need it to be. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do exactly the same weaving technique that I did with this one here. I'm going to weave, I'm going to make my chain, I'm going to weave in my tail ends again, and I'll meet you once I've done that, and we'll finish off by sewing all the pieces together. So I'll see you shortly. Okay, so I've got my my actual necktie part there done, and I've made my chain of 120, and I've woven in those tail ends. So now it's just a matter of putting this all together. So take your flower stems and your bow with its little tails on it. We're going to use these tails for sewing. So now, yeah, it's just a matter of putting these pieces together using just some basic hand sewing techniques. So just work out where you want your bow to sit. and you'll just start to sew it on. Now it's good idea to use both, you know, have two long tails for sewing, because then you can kind of center it more easily. So let's get that out of the way. I've got a little tail sticking out there. Let's just snap that off. So what I tend to do is sort of one side. I'm going to come up. Actually, let's go right through to the other side, so that, you know, there's no right or wrong way to do this. You've just got to sew it on in a way that makes you happy. So what I'll tend to do is I'll tend to go through, and I'll come into the back of that area where I've into the back there, where I've wound around the center of the bow. Come on, needle, come through. There we go. And then I'm going to I'll go back through, and then I'll get my other tail end. And actually I might even sort of draw these two together a little bit. Because it's so hot, my hands are a bit sticky. So then I'm going to do a similar sort of thing with the other tail. And then of course you'll be sewing eventually, I just start with sewing on the bow, but you could sew on your necktie at the same time, but I tend to do it one piece at a time. So I'm just going to go into the back there. Sorry for I've got slippery fingers because of the heat and sweatiness. So let's just make sure I'm getting this how I want it to be. There we go. So you just make sure that your bow is going on straight, and that's why it's a good idea to have these two sides, because you can kind of even it up, like sewing one side and then sew the other side. So I'm going back and then through the center, through that center area. So let's see how that's sitting. Yeah, pretty good. Then I'm just going to go back through. And I'm going to let's start to sew this part on as well. So you'll just make sure it's folded in half and incorporate this into your sewing at the back here. And you'll just sew that on. So yeah, just basic hand sewing techniques, and like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Just make it as neat as you can. And you know, if you've got it's a little bit messy at the back, it's not a big deal. Oh, these needles. So I'm going to continue fighting with this off camera, because you don't need to see me fighting with my sweaty hands. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to just finish off with my two tail ends, sewing and attaching this tie at the back here. So I'm going to just, you know, attach it with a few stitches, and I'll come back and we'll finish off together. So my apologies for my slippery fingers. So it doesn't, oh yeah, there we go. Doesn't make this as easy to demonstrate as I would like it to be. So I'm just going to add a few more stitches in here to secure this necktie at the back, and I'll see you shortly. Okay, so I've finished sewing on my tie is sewn on there, and you can see at the front I've got my little bow on there. Can I just shape that a little bit more if I want to? Actually, I've got another little tail end sticking out there, I think. Or maybe it's just a stitch. No, it's just a stitch. I can fix that up after. So there we go. Now, so I'm pretty happy with that. Everything's as secure as I need it to be. So what I just do with these remaining tail ends, if I've got 2 tail ends, I usually do this. I just tie a little simple double knot at the back there. And then I'll just snip off those ends. And you can weave them in if you want to, but it's at the back, so it's, you know, it's not going to be visible. And I'll just snip that off. And there's your little lavender necktie. So I've got the 2 that are pretty much exactly the same, but I've just got this one. When I tried this one on Melba, it's you know, it's really pretty, but it's just didn't hang low enough for me, so I just wanted to make this one hang a little bit lower. So you can see I've got about the same amount of stem at the top, but this one just hangs just a little bit lower. So yeah, this is cute. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. You know, it's a little bit fiddly, and you know, as a beginner, I think it's doable, but you know, it's a little bit fiddly. So you have to have a little bit more patience. But I think the end result is really worth it. Like, how cute is that? So, like I said, I hope you've enjoyed it. Please send photos along if you've made this and if you've made it in different colours. And, you know, I would love to see your photos. It always gives me such great pleasure to see your photos, see your creativity, meet your cat. So send those along to catventurous.community@gmail.com, or you can tag us on social media at catventurous.crochet. And yeah, just a little bit of a, you know, a fun item for summer. And Melba and I live in Provence in the south of France, so you know, I thought this was kind of fitting. So thanks very much for being here, and my apologies once again for my sweaty fingers. Living in Provence is great, but it's also super hot, so slip your fingers. So yeah, anyway, thanks very much for being here, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks, bye. Oh, you did good. Yeah. Thanks, Melba. Good girl. Okay, you can go.